The Shaa was the last of its kind. It lay on a couch in the great refuge, the huge domed building carved out of the great granite plateau of the high city, the massive edifice from which the Shaa had once set forth to conquer their empire, from which their councils had ruled the destiny of billions, and now to which they came to die. The Shaa was named Anticipation of Victory. It had been born in the early days of the Praxis, when the Shaa had commenced to plan conquests, but had not yet begun them, and in the course of its long life, it had personally witnessed the glories and triumphs that followed. Other races had fallen one by one beneath the Shaa yoke, and on these the Shaa and its peers had imposed the uniformity of their rule. Anticipation of Victory itself had not left the great refuge in centuries. It was surrounded at all times by attendants and officials, members of subject races who brought reports and requests, who transmitted its orders to the farthest reaches of its dominions. Servants washed and dressed the Shaa, maintained the vast computer network to which its nerves had been connected, and brought choice foods to cater to its diminished appetite. Though it was never alone, not for an instant, nevertheless the Shaa was tormented by the bitter pangs of loneliness. There was no one left to understand, no one with whom to share its memories of glory. Memories of those early days were undiminished. The Shaa remembered with brilliant clarity the fever that burned among its peers, the urge to bend all others, to bend the universe itself to the perfect truth of the Praxis. It remembered the splendor of the early victories, how the primitive Naxids had been turned to the service of the Shaa, how others had then fallen, the Terrans, the Tormenel, the Lyones, and others. Yet with each conquest had come diminished expectation, a slight reduction of the fever that burned in the Shaa. Each race first had to be raised to the knowledge of their duty, cultivated with exquisite care like trees raised from seedlings, trees whose limbs had to be tied and twisted and shaped so they would achieve perfection and union with the Praxis. And, like trees, the servitor races had to be pruned with bullets and whips and skinning knives, with the great annihilating fire of antimatter bombs, with the slow wasting of radiation, and the slower, inexorable decline of starvation. The labor had been immense, the burden enormous, and the results uncertain. If only the Shaa had more time, if they had only had a few more 1,000 years in which to cultivate their garden of perfection, anticipation of victory could die in the certainty that its glorious task would be fulfilled. But the Shaa hadn't had the time they needed. The oldest succumbed first, their memories fading, not the old memories, which remained clear, but the newer memories, which, unable to displace the old, failed to find a place in their minds. The Shaa became unable to remember the flourishing of their own dream. They lost not the past, but the present. They sought artificial aids, massive computer memories that could be linked to their own nervous systems and record their own lives in exquisite detail. But in time, accessing these memories grew wearisome, and eventually a painful burden no longer worth the effort. So, one by one, the great constellation of the Shaa began to wink out. The Shaa did not fear to inflict death, nor did they fear death themselves. Sad in the knowledge that they had become a burden on their own dream, they chose their own deaths, and when they died with ceremony. And now, anticipation of victory lay on its couch, among the great machines through which it searched for his memories, and it knew that soon the time would come to lay down its responsibilities. It had done its best to guide the younger races along the proper paths. In its time, it had awarded both great riches and terrible punishments. It had created a system by which the Praxis could be maintained after its death and hold the empire stable. Its greatest hope was that, after its death, Nothing would change. Nothing at all. Or ever.